A couple of weeks ago, I preached about tools for managing uncertainty and the anxiety that can come from uncertainty. And yeah, it's been a heck of a couple of weeks, huh? When the Right Reverend Buddy, the Episcopalian bishop in D.C., preached the Christian gospel at the National Prayer Breakfast, lots of church and state language got batted around by politicians. And I got riled up, thinking about our history and about the role and obligation of religion and people of faith to speak truth to power. From the times of the Hebrew prophets like Amos and Hosea to Jesus, and through a couple thousand years of prophetic leaders and movements popping up again and again to today. Religion and government have a complicated relationship and history. Sometimes governments impose religious ideologies and values, like in a theocracy. Sometimes they incentivize certain behaviors and moral ideas informed by a religious underpinning, like in Christian social democratic governments in Europe back in the 90s, when they offered financial incentives to women to stay home and have children. Sometimes religions seek to persuade governments through leading social movements, like both Christian evangelicals and liberals in the United States. Sometimes religions are oppressed and censored by governments. Governments and religion can fill similar roles in people's lives, offering ideas and incentives to guide behavior, shaping worldviews, education, and values. At the founding of our country, the pilgrims who set across the ocean, and many who have followed to this day, were and are seeking to leave behind religious persecution and to have the freedom to live out the understanding of their faith in public as they believe and believed was their right and responsibility. And now, we have talked a lot before about religious history in the United States and the birth of our own Unitarian and Universalist traditions, the changes in American religion and politics in the 19th century, wherein over time, and with the protections of speech and government, theological differences in the United States became more matters of disagreement, and maybe some public fights in the newspaper, but no longer resulted in inquisitions, forced exile, and burning down people's homes and houses of worship, at least for white Christians. So, when we talk about the separation of church and state, that's a two-way street. And it doesn't mean that the church and state are not in relationship. It means that the state will not regulate the church in matters of theology and organization, and that clergy are no longer employees of the government. It means that the church will not tell its members that they must vote for candidate A, B, or C. What it does not mean is that religious bodies will not advocate on behalf of people to the government. We will continue to speak truth to power. We will fight for our values and the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Friends, through our democratic process, we have chosen a leader who has a stated goal to dismantle our government and impose Christian nationalist values. And in the first 2 weeks of his administration, has done an impressive job of moving in that direction. And this is concerning for both human rights and our democracy. With the words of Bishop Buddy being lifted up by congresspeople as something that was not okay for a minister to say, and with our wonderful Quaker friends filing amicus briefs to the court regarding sanctuary, this is a time for religious bodies who believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all, of justice for all people, of the importance of compassion and love to guide us, to stand the heck up. Things are moving very fast, and generations who came before us have documented how quickly rights and freedoms can be first stifled through fear and then silenced through policy and violence. We are at a time in our democracy when the little stuff is going to matter. Where and how we gather, where we shop and spend our time, what we do and do not say out loud. It matters that we remain in community with one another and with people who are different from ourselves. We have to find shared connections and values along with our differences so that we remain in community together. We cannot allow ourselves to be isolated from each other and relinquish our power to shape our own futures and government. In the movie Groundhog Day, what is it that snaps Bill Murray out of maybe thousands of years of repetition of the same day? Selflessness and compassion, rather than orchestrating his world to get what he wants. The Pod Save America guys said something this week that I really took to heart. In giving advice to politicians, they advised not to be perfect, but to be honest and authentic, to talk about how we're feeling and not worry if we get the words right. I realize that this is a trap I have put myself in before, a Groundhog Day for me, that out in the world, when I'm not clearly in my role as a minister, out of fear I might say the wrong thing, I say nothing, which is not helpful. I can be accountable for my words and repair if I mess up. So I gave myself a series of challenges this week. I wrote to our senators and reps and told them what I was feeling and offered help in organizing. I put stuff out on public social media that I wouldn't normally. I started laying groundwork for some new community connections to help in direct action around immigration in the Berkshires, which I'll share with you when I know more. And that was my week one. It's often said that we as individuals can't and shouldn't try to fix or change big problems alone. And that when millions of us do small things, we can move mountains. And I'll be honest, I've had some moments of despair in the last week, thinking of the suffering that is happening for what seems to be both morally bankrupt and foolish reasons. From kids going hungry and preschools being closed, to medicines aging on shelves rather than being distributed around the world, to trans adults and kids being endangered in our prisons, military, schools, and streets, and to women losing access to medical care, to all of us being in danger from the dismantling of important research and monitoring of climate and health. The list is long and really just sad. It makes me want to scream in the streets and to the heavens, why? Because our economy wasn't great? Because of racism and misogyny? Because we are so isolated that we don't know our neighbors and are out of practice at empathy? Yeah, all of that. So yesterday morning, I lost it. And what brought me back was remembering the millions of small things. If we all do something every day that lives out our faith, enacts compassion in the world, one thing, that is millions of acts of compassion, and that matters. If we all do one small thing that helps stand up for someone else, that matters. We need big actions too. We need an army of lawyers and constitutional scholars and nonprofits and spiritual leaders to not cede the floor to bigots and straight up nonsense. But I'm not a lawyer or a constitutional scholar. I can help amplify their voices in my own networks of people. I can do small things. We can do small things, and sometimes big things, to stand up for compassion and justice and the vulnerable, to honor the inherent worth and dignity of all. Our actions to these ends are acts of faith informing our lives as citizens and human beings. So, if you get overwhelmed, if you have a morning like I had yesterday, I encourage you to remember the words of the 20th century Unitarian minister Edward Everett Hale. I am only one, but I am still one. I cannot do everything, but I can still do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something I can do. So may it be, and amen.